Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. Today's topic is really interesting. In May, the U.S. Supreme Court returned a majority decision to overturn the key federal anti-sports betting law, prohibiting states like Wisconsin from legalizing sports wagering. So here to talk about what this will mean to the future of sports betting is one of the industry's leading authorities and the CEO of Chalkline Sports, Dan Kustelski. It's great to have you with us, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell us about Chalkline Sports. What kind of services do you offer?
Chalkline Sports is ultimately it's a data company. We're laser focused on customer acquisition and retention on behalf of our customers. And, we're really focused on emerging markets like Africa and now the United States. And our clients are casinos, tracks. We've got media companies, and really anybody who wants to engage with sports bettors. We come from a background of running sports books, and so we know that one of the pain points for what's going to happen here in the United States over the next 5 years, customer acquisition. We know that that's going to be a massive pain point for the operators of sports books, and that's really what we're all about at Chalkline Sports.
Well, I love this topic. So what's your take? Obviously, you probably like this ruling because that's going to be good for your business.
I would say yes.
But what's your take on what this Supreme Court ruling means?
Well, first and foremost, it really does take sports betting out of the dark. There was an estimated $150 billion last year inside the United States that was wagered on sports. And about 98% of that was illegal. So it really takes a lot of that money, from going offshore or going somewhere illegally. What it allows is an environment and a framework for obviously the states to manage it like they've done all the other forms of gambling or the tribes, and then protect players, offers them, a good industry understanding of that sports betting is a form of gambling, and it provides them some sort of responsible gambling program in most of the states, I will say. And
what was legal, I didn't think was necessarily fair. I mean, why should Nevada get everything?
It was a monopoly that Nevada had. So I think what we're seeing is, the states are looking to sports betting to provide, some much needed funding for various causes. And certainly the sports betting industry, which, was relatively small in the U.S., there's only about $5 billion that was wagered in Nevada, will now become what's estimated to be in the next 3 to 5 years, the largest legal jurisdiction across the globe. So the U.S. is going to go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly.
Wow.
How is this taxed by states? Is this a state by state? They do it differently? I mean, do you pay taxes if you win? Does the sports book pay all the taxes? How does that work?
Right. So each state has a slightly different tax regime. Pennsylvania has actually taxed the gross profit, so that's bets minus payouts at about 36%, which is pretty high.
Yeah.
And then places like New Jersey have looked at kind of 8 to 13% taxes. West Virginia, I think, is 10%. Mississippi is somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. So typically, it's on the net revenues earned by the sports books. And then obviously, players, if you win a certain amount from a book, obviously, it would be no different than casino earnings. You would have to file a tax report.
So I think
that.
It's like $600 or $800 or something like that in Wisconsin, where then you have to give them your Social Security number.
Correct.
But that's not necessarily on table games. Sportsbook, I would imagine then that would be more like a slot machine win.
That's correct.
Okay.
So Dan, how different is sports betting in the U.S. versus other countries? I know you have an office in South Africa. How different are we here from other countries?
I would say two parts. The one is just the sports in general. So if you look at a regulated environment like Nevada, 38% of all betting is on American football. About 31% is on basketball, and then about 25% is on baseball. Those three sports consume 90% of the legal wagering that happens in Nevada, and that's a pretty unusual mix. I would say, when you look over in Europe and when you look at in Africa, soccer or football is a majority of a book, usually more than 50%. And then you've got these other sports like tennis. Tennis was about 10 or 11% of my sports book in South Africa. So, it just kind of depends on the sports that are popular in those particular regions. But here in the United States, because American football is really only played here, and there's a little bit, we dabble a little bit in London and in Mexico, but that's probably one of the biggest differences that I've seen, and just some of the terminology as well. But I would say not a real well-educated sports betting. If I look at the masses of America, there's just not a lot of education around it. So, and that's simply because it's been illegal. So I
exactly. I don't know.
There's
how
going to be a
bet.
lot of education.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Those over-unders always
confuse
confuse me, I'm like, what is that?
Oh, yes, right. That's exactly. And people ask me all the time what a money line is. So there's just some general education that I think people are going to want. If you're an operator, it's certainly something that they're going to want to offer as a service, but also just the general understanding of sports betting, I think, is a little less than say Europe and Africa.
So how are you going to help companies prepare for that, to educate the public and be ready when they are legal, which I think is going to be soon, correct?
Yes. I think there's 4 or 5 states already that have already started taking bets, and there's probably going to be another 15 in the next 18 months. So it's going to be a relatively quick rollout for some states. What we offer at Chalkline Sports is we offer a free-to-play version, and that is just a lot of knowledge, understanding, comfort that can come from just picking this coming week's NFL games, either against the spread or the overs and unders or on the money lines, and you can start to do all of this relatively frictionless. It's not, it's free, so it's not gambling, but people can learn a little bit about it and understand, I won this, I didn't win that. Why did I get these outcomes? And that's what we do at Chalkline. We also bake into that platform that we've built. Oh man, pretty much any sport under the sun and most markets that are available on those sports. Obviously here in the United States, it's really focused on, football, basketball, and baseball. And so we just help these operators that we've got Tropicana in New Jersey and FanDuel. We just help them identify and engage with potential sports bettors and get them to do that on a very fun platform like our free-to-play platform.
And then every time somebody plays a game, you're also acquiring names that you can market to in the future once they are online.
There's a lot of sports bettors that sit on the databases for all of these casinos. So we literally just go into these land-based casinos and just help them understand sports betting in general, but then also understand how you market to sports bettors and how to identify them, engage with them so that when sports betting does become legal in their state and they turn the switch on, they've got customers.
What does the demographic of today's sports bettor look like? Is it younger than your typical, you go to a Native American casino these days and it's old.
Yes.
And the millennial generation doesn't seem to have embraced gambling as a form of entertainment. Is it different in sports betting?
I would say that sports betting definitely brings in a younger skew. 25 to 45 is really the sweet spot for it. And if you look at most loyalty program database average ages, we're looking at 45, 46, 47. Very similar to the horse racing industry as well. The horse racing industry is an old demographic. So the tracks and the land-based casinos that are going to be getting these sports betting licenses are pretty excited about offering a form of gambling that does appeal to the younger generation. And I think sports betting has this ability, almost similarly to maybe daily fantasy as well, is that putting $10 on the Badgers, it is gambling, yes, but it's really a form of entertainment.
Yeah, it is, because you'll get 3 or 4 hours of entertainment watching that versus $10 in a hand of blackjack can be less than a second and a half.
It can go quick. Yeah, that's right. So I think that it definitely appeals to a younger generation, and I think that that's one of the reasons why the American Gaming Association, which was the big lobby group in Washington D.C., that's one of the reasons why they were pushing for the legalization of sports betting, was because it would expose them obviously to a new gambling vertical, but it would also expose them to a demographic of people that that would help the aging community and their loyalty programs.
Now, what about online betting and in-play betting? Do you see this happening as well as the states come on board?
Online and mobile wagering next 3 to 5 years is really going to be where the growth happens. There are states that already have live online and mobile sports books. My sports book in South Africa was 70% mobile. of all the bets. So, I mean, that was a few years back. I can only imagine. We do everything on our phone. We check it 200 times a day. That's really where sports betting is going to flourish. Now, some states are a little nervous about immediately offering online or mobile betting. They're starting with retail betting, but I anticipate that will change pretty quickly. And then in play is another. It's a slightly more advanced type of betting. But at the halftime, for instance, at the halftime of a football game, you can bet on who's going to win the rest of the game or what the point spread is going to be. And that to me is really where the future is going to be. It will take a while for the sports bettors in America to be educated enough to place those bets and to want to place those bets. But I think that Europe and Africa have shown us that the trends are mobile and live in play.
So speaking of Europe, how do you think the expansion of sports betting will impact the media landscape here? I notice I'm a golf fan, so when I watch the Open in Great Britain, you'll see the announcers talk about the line and who's favored and stuff like that, much more than you do on when you're watching a golf tournament here in the U.S.
I think it's going to get interwoven pretty quickly. I think ESPN College Game Day has, they've already got a guy there that talks about the odds. I think ESPN is rolling out a very specific gambling type of show. Fox is coming out with the gambling show. It just feels like, and also just experiencing this in another country, the odds were always taboo here in the U.S., but that's no longer. And in fact, if you don't mention the odds, then you're probably missing a beat because somebody's paying attention to that particular, those two talking heads specifically so that they can get some information on a wager. So I really do think it's going to transform the media landscape. And I think that there's going to be a lot of interest, almost similarly to daily fantasy. I mean, there's specific shows that were built around
fantasy,
picking
sure,
lineups and all that kind of stuff. So I see, but if I could compare it, the daily fantasy that happens in the United States is like a $3 billion, $4 billion wagered industry versus 150 billion. So you can imagine that it's just going to be a different scale, and it's going to certainly impact the media, not just from a type of content, but also from sponsorships. I think Bet Chicago was sponsoring the John Deere in July. Yeah, MGM just came on board and sponsored the NBA as the gaming partner. So, those companies are going to be sponsoring teams, and they're also going to be wanting to buy advertising on sports specific, shows and platforms. So I think that there's going to be a pretty good uptick for the media companies that buy into sports betting.
Boy, and if I was confused about over and unders, I really don't understand fantasy football. So there's going to have to be a lot of education there too, because I don't think I'm in the dark here. I think there's a lot of people who feel exactly the same way. But I'm taking that you think there's going to be a change in the way sports are presented on TV.
I do. I think that what the angles that people will be talking about around those particular games will start to have a much more sports betting influenced feel to it and flavor. And the overs and the unders and money lines, all of those words, and be really well, explained during those sportscasts.
It won't just be that casual reference that Al Michaels on Sunday Night Football.
Right.
He always kind of slightly has been weaving that in for about the last 20 years.
He has been.
Because he's a better.
Musburger was always talking about
Right.
the boys in the desert. I mean,
Right.
Yes, like that. All that stuff will come out,
right.
and it will be pretty overt. I think. I think that there's going to be a very clear. Here's the game. Who is the favorite on the money line, and then what's the point spreads and what's the overs and unders. I think that's going to be pretty much part and parcel for most of the discussion.
What about the amount of sports on TV? Do you see that expanding as well?
There have been so many studies now that have been done in the United States around sports and the interest that people will have in sports if they have $5 on that particular game or if sports betting is legal. And so I can't help but think that the calendars are pretty full, and they've maxed all these, the Major League Baseball and, NBA, all the major sports have really maximized their playing seasons in order to benefit from but by selling the TV rights. I don't know if there's going to be an awful lot more. I think, Jerry Jones just recently from the NFL was saying, hey, listen, why play 4, preseason games? Why don't we just add, 2 more actual games that count? And so we might see some shifts in that, but I can't help but think, WNBA, like all of these kind of maybe second tier outside of the major leagues, these second and third tier sports leagues and teams will certainly benefit, I think, from interest that sports bettors have in those games, and they would want to watch those games probably more than they ever have in the past if they've got money on it.
Do you think there's any kind of risk to the sports industries themselves? NBA has definitely embraced the gambling now and signing that contract. And, when you think of ends of games, that garbage time basket or that meaningless field goal at the end of the game that impacts a point spread, how do you think that might make people question coaches and individual calls or plays?
I think that there are going to be challenges, and there are always going to be challenges around, maybe match fixing might not be the right word, but just altering things, based on the odds. Unfortunately, though, that's a reality that will forever plague sports. And certainly the amount of money that gets wagered on these sports, I think will have an impact on, there needs to be more and pretty strict measures, I think, on the NCAA and college sports. I think just recently, in fact, last football season, college football was bet on more than pro football. You can't help but think that there might be a lot of opportunities for there to be some corruption or some match fixing, but it's already a possibility, and it's probably
right.
So I think what legalizing it does, and this is what New Jersey has done, is they've just said, look, what college games that are played in New Jersey, can't be wagered on. New Jersey college teams that go out of state can't be wagered on. So they've put in some kind of protections around college athletes in particular to create awareness, and I think the NCAA's pretty in-depth, education program around, sports bettings and the challenges that face the student athletes.
This may even advance the discussion on whether college players should be paid.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's a lot of people making a lot of money on college athletes, and the fact that they don't get any is probably going to be further challenged when sports betting is live and running in 30 plus states in the United States.
And since we're a marketing show, Dan, I guess we do have to ask the question, how do you think sports betting might change the way brands interact with sports?
Brands are going to have to get used to possibly dealing with a sports betting brand. I was in the sports marketing industry in South Africa leading up to 2010. And there were so many times when sponsors of a particular event or a league, we would all get together and we would say, hey, listen, how can we make, 1 + 1 equal, 3 or 4 by, possibly, working together on various initiatives. And so you might have some interesting brands doing some interesting things with sports betting brands, because I can only imagine that, come 3 to 5 years, MGM is not going to be the only brand that sponsors the league from a gaming perspective. I mean, if you remember Daily Fantasy, DraftKings, they pretty much have a relationship with almost half of all the sports teams in the United States, and FanDuel probably has a relationship with the other one. So that's going to happen, and I think that it's certainly going to create some interesting opportunities and products and promotions around some of the sports events.
So I'm sure we have some casino marketers that listen to our show around the country. So what would be the best way for somebody to connect with you if they're looking for help in expanding their visibility in this new sport?
Just getting ready for it too, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they can reach me at Daniel at Chalkline Sports or go to our website. We've got some nice case studies, but I think that the casino industry is going to go through. I think they are trying to be maybe a little more digitally savvy, just in general. I think sports betting might be one of those things that helps push it, because there will now be a real need to have a mobile product. If you don't have a mobile optimized website, I know it sounds a little archaic, but there are some casinos that don't. And so just understanding the power and the value of a good social media awareness campaigns, and getting people from digital to retail and then from retail back into digital. I think those are some of the things that I think we're going to see the casino industry, start to understand much better, because of the ability for the sports betting to be on mobile phones and the brand to be extended to people across the States.
What a fascinating topic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dan, and best of luck to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. Nancy,
Thanks, Dan.
I appreciate the time.
We'll have his contact information on our show notes today. And if you like what you've heard, please don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of regional, national, and even global brands on a daily basis. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.